doing a Modern Sales Pros event. We're super excited to dive right into this amazing topic, RevOps Unleash, the secret to skyrocketing ARR per rep. But before we begin, I'm going to let folks trickle in and we'll start this event with a fun little icebreaker. I love to ask our panels today, as we're heading into the summer months, do you have any fun summer plans coming up? Tyler, how about we kickstart you and ask if you have any fun summer plans up your sleeve?
Oh, I don't have it. Well, we're going to be up in Orcas Island. I'm in the West Coast in Oregon area, and we're going to go up to Orcas Island, which is up off the Seattle area. And then I'll be in Italy towards of the September, so end of summer, if that still counts. That's
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Nothing too
I
fancy.
bet it's not too hot as well in September. I hear Italy in June, July, it is scorching hot. So that'll be a really nice fall trip.
That's the plan.
Dharmesh, how about you? Do you have any fun summer plans?
I'm in Europe right now, but I'm working. I'm not sure how much time I'm getting, but I'm working full hours, just in a different time zone.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and I hope the time zone isn't too abrupt. We appreciate your participation for this panel. Noah, what about you? Would you have any fun summer plans?
So my family and I, we've been trekking out to Montana for the summers, kind of when COVID hit. I've been out there since I was a kid, grew up in the Seattle area, but we went out there for a couple of weeks. COVID hit, everything shut down, and we just stayed for the summer. So we've just been going back, and kids can still get out there, get dirty, get all cut up, play with gardener snakes. It's always my dream that my kids could survive a night in the wilderness if they ever needed to. I don't know if growing up in the Bay Area is helping out any of that, but so we head out there for the summer. It's a lot of fun.
Montana is
nice.
awesome for kids. It's a great experience.
Yeah, learn great life skills over there. Well, awesome. Sounds like amazing summer plans for all of you. So let's start today. Again, we are talking RevOps Unleash, the secret to skyrocketing ARR per rep. But before we begin, I'm going to say a few words about Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them to see around corners they may not know about. We do this through live sessions like the one you're at today. We also have an online robust forum and our quarterly summits, which I'll talk about in the next slide. And we're starting to get back into in-person events. So if you're not already a part of MSP, you'll be invited to join right after this event. And speaking of our summit, we have one next month, July 18th to the 19th. Join us for Camp Modern Sales Pros, 15 plus events with 3,000 Modern Sales Pros in attendance. We have about 35 high caliber speakers. You'll hear from leaders at SalesLoft, Outreach, Gainsight, Stage 2 Capital, and so much more. I'll add the registration link in the chat. Be sure to sign up. It's going to be a great event. And some housekeeping notes. This event is being recorded, so if you have a friend or colleague that couldn't make it, rest assured they'll be able to access the recording and key takeaways on the previous event page before the end of the day. And if you have a question for our awesome panelists today, please leverage the Q&A function at the top right-hand corner or in the chat, and we'll be sure to get them live. Next, this event wouldn't be made possible without our awesome sponsor today, Fullcast. Fullcast is the only RevOps platform that seamlessly connects GTM planning with tactical execution. The platform enables users to easily build territories and quotas and continuously makes updates in response to evolving market conditions. It automatically syncs changes with the CRM. Fullcast users experience dramatically improve RevOps efficiency, sales performance, and talent retention. I'm going to drop their link to learn more in the chat. Be sure to check them out. They're doing awesome things. Now, enough about me. I'm going to pass it off to our awesome panelists today. I'm going to kick things off to Tyler, who's actually going to be moderating today's session. So Tyler, take it away, and I'll be coming back for closing remarks.
Great. Thank you. I'll be quick. Tyler, I head up customer success at Fullcast. I am lucky enough today to be able to moderate these two lovely individuals through our discussion on the secret to skyrocketing ARR per rep. So I'll hand it over to Noah Marks at Udemy to go ahead and introduce himself.
Sure thing. Thanks, Tyler. And I'm not head of sales. I'm going to just specify that right now. I run the go-to-market strategy and ops team. While I appreciate our head of sales, that's not a job I'm going to take on soon. Anyways, great to be here. I've known the Fullcast team for what seems probably like an eternity. It's maybe been a decade or more that I've kind of known the crew. So it's great to be on this, and we really appreciate you having me.
And Dharmesh?
Yeah, no, likewise, excited to be here with both you, Noah, and the MSP community. I think when we first started Fullcast, MSP community was about 1,500 people. And so the community's grown up since then. And then the complexity in RevOps function and awareness has grown up as well. So I'm excited to talk about all the things about RevOps.
Great. So I think now I've got sharing abilities. We do have some content here and we'll get into it. Let's find, there we go. So we wanted to talk a little bit, there, load it up. Dharmesh, you and I have kind of like talked a little bit of like, you know, this wartime and this peacetime thing. So I thought you'd be a great place to start and just give us like a little context around what do we mean by like this wartime and peacetime RevOps leaders and how these priorities kind of just like are different.
So I don't think of them as RevOps leaders. I think it's a leadership style, right? It's like some things that might work when things are great. That same management style, that same approach to doing things doesn't really transpire in times of crisis, right? And so people have to be willing to make switches. And what I mean by that is that when things are fine, keep status quo, right? You have the luxury of people had a luxury of budgets, and you had the time to think tools, and you could go ahead and just buy whatever you want, and do stuff. And you need more help, you just get more operational head. It was like, okay, fine, if my revenue ARR is growing, I'll have to go. And that was the mode of operation for a lot of RevOps teams till about a year ago, even 6 months ago. But now, as the leaders who are thriving are also leaders, the same leaders who are but able to switch their management style, the leadership style, to say, hey, what worked for us may not be the same thing, right? We're going to challenge the status quo. We're going to think about EBITDA. We're going to think about how we are contributing to EBITDA, right? I mean, essentially, ops has always been perceived as a cost center, not an investment. And as these leaders take the lens of saying, no, we are an investment center. The ROI is there on investment in ops as the companies look to scale, and they end up really helping the companies do more with less. So that's how we always think. And yeah, like Paul said, peacetime, absolutely not. In the RevOps world, no. There is always something new that's going on, but it's just the context of the leadership style that I think about.
Yeah, and Noah, you've led RevOps at several very successful companies, and I'm just curious from your perspective, do you find yourself switching between these two worlds, or do you just this is my framework, and this is how we, think about things in terms of allocating resources?
That's a good question, and I think what underlies a lot of where my focus, where I maintain my focus, has really been about this is a wartime environment potentially now, but I think it's the folks that have wartime experience that understand these compelling events and understand what could happen. And so I think it underlies my way of thinking in every organization I'm in, because knowing that things may be great, and oftentimes when our teams are brought on, it used to be kind of 40, 50, 60 million plus as the face of an IPO or an event is shaping up, and we need to figure out how to scale. But it's going even sooner to that, knowing that how do I think about the things I have to do now so that my growth and scale is easier. And so when every company I've been at, it's a mad race to take care of the stuff that might otherwise be kind of status quo, which is building out the fundamental foundational things, because you need to get those done because there's going to be a time when you do need to be thinking about what's next. You might outstrip your growth rates, and a change event may happen, and you need to be prepared with that infrastructure secure that you can provide the guidance to the business that requires. And so it's a mentality that you take on. And so it's interesting because sometimes I'll be at organizations like things are good, like, but what if they're not, right? Where's that compelling event? And so your sense of urgency might be a lot heightened in even times of peace, because you know that that's not going to last, and you need to be prepared to continue scaling the business if there is a shift.
You kind of just have to have this lens in the back of your head, just always like thinking about that next step, really.
Yep. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I think that's what drives us too, is thinking about next quarter, next year.
Yeah, in fact, to echo what Noah's saying, even what I've noticed is like companies were not seriously thinking about RevOps till there was significant scale, but now even at 10 million and 30 million, ARR, they are bringing senior RevOps leadership because companies are expecting RevOps to be that secret sauce, get the systems in place, and as such, leaders that are coming in there have to be successful ones are those that are actually challenging the status quo.
Yeah. So now we're going to talk a little bit about like this wartime piece, but we want to, why is RevOps actually that like so key? Why is RevOps super key to invest in, right? And we know that keeping the status quo is expensive. So, Dharmesh, again, going back to this piece, like, what are some of those things that you look at that are like, this is why RevOps needs to have the investment that it asks for?
So RevOps originated from sales ops, right? And the whole notion was, let's take away all non-selling activities that salespeople are doing and give them more time to sell. And so the whole goal was to make the sales team, or now their entire revenue team, it's beyond just sales and customer success, to be more impactful. But when you start with sales, the first thing a salesperson cares about is like, what's my territory and what's my quota? Those are the two things that they care about, because it's all about meeting OTE. And if you cannot give them, everybody gives them territories and quotas, but there's a lot of perception and emotion attached to territories and quotas. So if the RevOps organization cannot give them the perception of fairness, that drives higher attrition. And the cost of replacing a fully ramped producing AE is huge, right? It'll increase, you will see overall increase ramp time. You'll see, as a result of all those things, a lower rep attainment. When I started, my attainment used to be in 70%, somewhere around that. It was considered normal. Now you're lucky to get 52%. And we have had an explosion of tools, right? But not a similar explosion in RevOps capabilities being built in-house, which will then drive overall higher cost of sales. And as you start looking at the SaaS business, right, we talk about CSM and sales. The CSM and the renewals team's alignment to the sales teams, right, that gets broken because they're doing that again in a separate system, in a separate place. And so what we've seen is key part of RevOps is not about just buying more tools and hiring more people. It's about, can we optimize these fundamental things around territories and quotas and make sure that stuff does get, because if we can do to fix that, there's a lot we actually improvise to drive a higher cost of return on investment on sales. I was talking to somebody else, and they said they've invested in tools like Gong and Clary and all. So they got better reporting, better conversation. But if the fundamental planning function at the back end was broken, none of those tools were helping them, and that's why the attainment number has remained the same. I'd love to get Noah's thoughts on this, and like you've been experiencing this.
It's you teed up an unfair question because where I'll go with it. So, with just full transparency, Fullcast is a tool that I've purchased. In fact, it was the first tool I purchased in the last 3 companies in my role. because of exactly what Dharmesh says. It all fundamentally starts at the baseline. And all the other elements around how you optimize and generate productivity and all the rest, it fundamentally starts at the baseline of your capacity model in sales. And if you think about it, the first step in that is the opportunity. So I'll take a step back. The key goal here is you want breadth of performance. Ideally, you want a large percentage of your team to be above a certain level of attainment. Otherwise, your model breaks. And so fundamentally, sales ops organizations are trying to understand what that is. Because if your model is a nice bell-shaped curve right around 70 to 90% attainment, you're doing great, right? If it's a U-shaped curve, you're in a lot of pain because your model's extra expensive. And so the whole goal is, do you even just have an optimized model? And per Dharmesh's point there, I've now seen a multiple calculations done on this. And an enterprise sales rep, the cost of attrition is roughly $2 million. We did analysis like 8 or 9 years ago. Somebody else just did one a few months ago. I saw same exact number. So it's really expensive to the business when you have attrition. You also have missed opportunities. So the ability to start from the baseline and understand what is our capacity, what does that capacity model look like? And capacity model is effectively your operating model and the territories that you have. And that's step one. And so if you don't understand the elements there, the dynamics, if you're giving people a bunch of accounts and not sure if those accounts are better than another set, you need to really dig into that as one of the very first primary foundational things, because all the stuff on top of it is largely impacted by what you've given the territories out to the reps. If they're unsuccessful, have you been warming those territories up? Is there a dynamic around, is it an account level variable that determines the success of those accounts? Is it a region? Is it an industry? Is it your focus from your other parts of your lead generation engine? All those dynamics come into play. And honestly, again, if you don't start there and you start focusing, now not to say those other tools aren't relevant, but you're automatically off on a wrong foot, or potentially looking at refining something that you're not even in the ballpark, and you're trying to refine it within a couple of feet or a couple of inches. And again, the answer is hundreds of yards away.
Yeah, and the thing is that in most organizations, right, process is they're interrelated, the territory and the quotas, and things are constantly changing. People are always changing roles. So the fact that when you do this the way it is typically done in Excel spreadsheets, and there's a lot of things that fall through the cracks. I might have a territory sheet, I might have a quota sheet, but what happens in a rep is leaving territory from one territory to another, all leaving the company. I track a lot of those things offline manually, which don't get reported. Like I remember times that I would find out during a business review that a rep in Paris has left. Right? That's the first time I'm reading it. Well, it's in 2 months the person's gone. The manager knew it, or maybe the team in Paris knew it, but we at this was at Salesforce, we would not know about it. And we're like, okay, so if we had known this 2 months ahead of time, we would have factored in the impact of replacing that person, and the quota is done, now the team is carrying. Now we're going to scramble around and figure out how you're going to make up for that loss.
I will add to that. So just really quickly, there's got to be countless instances where people are like, okay, so we have some reps that are crushing it, really, really good reps, and other reps that are just struggling. What is it those really good reps are doing? And everyone's like listening in on the gong calls. They're analyzing all the metrics and everything else. Like, we can't figure it out. It's fundamentally the reps that potentially been around for a really long time have accumulated some of the best accounts out there and the best territories. And there's this unevenness to start. So you're not even on the same playing field when you're going back and trying to analyze, well, how do I correct this? Or if I need to make a change in our operating motion, or I need to think about a what if scenario, you're iterating on something that's almost immaterial, because foundationally they're just starting at a different starting point.
Yeah, I mean, like Warren Buffett says, right? You put a great manager in a shitty industry, the industry wins. So you have a great rep and a patch that's not fair, not the right accounts. No matter how good the rep is, the territory will win. And that's the part that you need as a RevOps leader, especially in today's environment when we look at, it's very dynamic. You don't have to be constrained by geo boundaries, right? You can sell from anywhere. And so driving what I see is a constantly being tuned revenue and a territory and a quota model is critical. You don't shift quotas that much. Territories are tweaked all the time, but what you really want to do is what happens when somebody leaves. Am I getting crediting and debiting of quotas from one tier to another tier? Being able to track who was effectively covering what when, so we can accurately give compensation. Those are the things that the faster and better we can get at it, they have massive impact on overall. You can do a lot more with even this current headcount.
And also, let me chime in one last time. Sorry, because there's another huge element to this, and we're talking on the sales side, but customer success is more dynamic, more in flex, and requires the same amount of rigor, but often gets overlooked in the sense of territory planning. Sales territories tend to last for the year. You set them up and they're pretty good. You might have people getting hired through the year and you shift those territories across. But customer success changes dynamically every single time you win a new customer or lose an existing customer. And the concept around retention is no different. A dollar is a dollar is a dollar. Revenue is all the same. And so what do you think about what's that right level of capacity from my customer success reps? What's their ability to really manage the customers? How would I tier the different customers together? How would I create a different effective territory of existing customers between the different types of either it's the go-to-market coverage for customer success or the type of however tiering you're doing it? Those elements are critical in understanding how can you most effectively support your customers and give them the right amount of attention to ensure that they're not going to attrit for any other reasons other than they're just going a different direction, right? How do you maintain that as much as possible?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, I mean, we kind of already really talked about this, but we want to just go into the details on just like, how does our actual focus shift from this operational piece, which we've talked about the gongs and the analysis of like how conversations go and what are the reps doing, into this like strategy and planning piece, and really why this is so important for us to focus on the optimizing of the strategy. So Dharmesh, I'd just be curious from your end, like on the planning side, you've talked a lot about the setting things up in terms of making sure we're dealing with the adds, moves, and changes. So as reps get promoted and leaving and hiring new reps and making sure territories are ready. But as we think about the earlier standpoint, so like carving out territories, making sure things are ready for those reps, curious to just hear your thoughts on just what are some of those things that people can be doing to optimize for that?
Yeah, I think the keyword is optimization. Like I would say everything in this slide, every RevOps team is doing it, right? The ones that are in green, I think we've got our automation in place now, and we're doing a pretty good job than we were doing even a few years ago. Like there was no conversational intelligent tools, right? Incentive calculation, we were tied with Exactly and perhaps some other tools, but now we got Captivate and Spiff. So there are modern tools out there that are helping. What's happening on the other side is we've really not invested heavily in the strategy and planning side. Companies do it, but it's not changed. It's still in 90% of the organization is a very Excel-driven process with operational resources being managed. Like when you're at Salesforce, for example, I had a team of 40 in Costa Rica just managing moves and changes of accounts and people, right? Every time somebody says, I want to move an account from person A to person B, well, you need RVP approvals. It takes a couple of weeks before it can get done. Extremely manual. And I think that's where the opportunity is for us to do, because change cycles have changed. We just came out of COVID, we had economy, and then every quarter the Feds will say we might have a recession. So from a strategy perspective, yes, you have a current plan, but you always have to have the next plan. And like Noah said, right, you layer on that the CSM team and the renewals team. So it exponentially gets a lot more complicated keeping all those things. And historically, because companies have not really focused on a lot of the automation on that end, I think that's where the opportunity is now to go ahead and streamline those functions.
And Noah, I don't want to leave out this giant green CRM data governance box down at the bottom here. And we kind of like put this overarching thing, and like, you know, we're talking about optimizing the strategy. I'm just curious to hear from your perspective, like how important is the data governance side of things as it relates to all of this stuff that we want to be doing in the strategy and planning world?
Yeah, I have a couple of images that I share probably too often, but one is this scale cake concept, and the bottom level of this cake is data and system integrity. There's then efficiency, repeatability, predictability, and productivity as you go up this chain. And the goal is to get to the productivity level where you're focused on the most strategic things to drive productivity across the business. And the thing that fails the most is that the data is just awful. And I'll tell you, the conversation around data governance in some form is happening in every single company out there, and everybody struggles to do it. There's a few vendors out there that can help clean it, but it's maybe not in the right sort of framework of how you're going to market. So how do you change that? How do you make sure that it's underlying everything? And if the data is bad, then everything else is pretty much suspect. If you're creating a territory, you don't know the size of the companies or how you're thinking about whether it's a subsidiary coverage or a parent or global parent, all those elements out there that people get really in the weeds on the operation side is just kind of fundamental, and it's often broken, and it's often just kind of a mess. And again, if you don't know where you are, it's hard to tell where you're going. And so we've spent a tremendous, in fact, that's actually, that problem was one of the first problems I had when I reached out and realized that Dharmesh, you guys had started Fullcast, was that we were spending way too much time on that, and it just can sink you. We didn't have 40 folks in Costa Rica, and actually, I didn't know that team was in Costa Rica. I might have applied, but we didn't have that capability. And so, how do you focus the team and really just less around the data stuff and more about what do you need to do with it, which is fundamentally why I'm so excited about the AI/ML kind of revolution, or what's happening is I fundamentally think the things that the core products that are in our tech stack today will be replaced by a vendor I don't even know of in a year's time, because there's so much time and effort on the individual manual person managing data. And it oftentimes falls to a bunch of analysts junior analysts in ops to take care of, or an outsourced team. That it's not about the data. It's not about collecting a bunch of data. It's what are you going to do with it? That's the interesting stuff. That's the strategy and planning of what do you use this data for? Yep. So I'm excited, because that's been my biggest critique of any of the vendors out there today is I don't need more data from you. Tell me specifically, answer these questions. And the stuff I'm seeing right now is answering those questions. So I'm kind of excited to it, because team's going to be shifting more towards that strategic vision than all the stuff that just administrates them in the back end.
Yeah, and I think it's like you said, the reason why we have data governance on the slide is because we said everybody has to deal with it. Now, I've seen master data projects; they never go anywhere. It's a lifetime of employment for the team that's driving it, but it doesn't really achieve anything, because essentially every ops team, every sales strategy team has a policy. They have the rules of engagement defined. It is the enforcement of the rules. Now, going back to the peacetime, wartime kind of thinking perspective, successful RevOps leaders are able to enforce those policies, which then sort of drive better data hygiene and governance around those things. The word is governance, right? You have a lot of places. What I've seen is RevOps leaders completely abdicate control, right? And so they're like, we have no control over the sales team, so we will do whatever the sales field want us to do. Of course, the sales field will take the shortest path. They will not. You'll not, for example, you'll not create accounts with all the critical information that you needed. And suppose look that up. That's a go-to-market strategy we come up, and most of our accounts don't have that industry flag or no data-related industry. How are you going to segment, right? And so that becomes the underlying piece. And a good RevOps leader is able to enforce governance around data. That gets then translated and leveraged for territory, quota, and even things like we are talking about, the ML and generative stuff on our side, on our roadmap, which is around how. So I have basic questions like how many people should I hire? When should I hire? Where should I hire? Underpinning is data, right? And so I can give you
also, hey, Dharmesh, on that, on that point, Dharmesh. So and this is why it's a broader go-to-market challenge, is because it's not just, you mentioned kind of the more territory aspects to it, but that's the same data that's driving the decisions from your marketing organization and driving from customer success and driving product level decisions. And so fundamentally, it's that's kind of where the whole go-to-market strategy RevOps thing came around, is like, how do we think this across this more broadly? Because all of these have very specific impacts, and the consumption of this data is going to drive all the different levers that's going to raise the tide for everybody. So there's such a broad scope to the impact of what this is, that governance is really about how are you looking at your business, period. And if you don't have that in place, you don't have systems to support that, you're going to be making bad decisions, and that's going to be costly at a company level.
Yeah. So here's kind of what I'm hearing, right? The whole thing of this is talking about, how are we going to skyrocket ARR per rep? And what I'm hearing from both of you is that strategy and planning is our key. Spend the time over there, really nailing that down. And of course, the data piece feeds into that. So that's also super important to make sure that is, tack sharp, right?
Yeah.
But that's going to require an investment in not just time, but resources, potentially tools, those things. And that's stuff that you're going to need to go and build a business case for. So I'm just curious to hear from the both of you, Dharmesh. Actually, Noah, why don't we start with you on this? Like, how do you build this case to go and get what you need so you can deliver on that strategy and planning side, so that you can then drive that ARR per rep?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I actually get these sort of questions quite a bit. And the key is ROI is something you earn. What's the cost return or the value on an investment, but the ROI is something you learn. You're going to have to go out there as an operations leader and plead a case of, this is what we need to do and this is why we do it. And I think the very first step is, some people are in organizations that there just isn't that framework to allow it. The role that they hired into isn't looked at with the respect to be able to drive that change. And so part of that is, when you're interviewing for these roles, is really understanding what is the role of this RevOps or GTM strategy and ops role, and what's the job design, like what is it geared to do, who's it aligning to. And if you're aligning to somebody strategic who's thinking about the global benefit of the business, so oftentimes that's a president or CEO, and you're the only other person theoretically on the business side thinking about all the things that they're thinking about, the element here is you need a bit of rope in the beginning to be able to make some bets. And that has to be something, the groundwork that you're laid in, or the people that you've hired or hired into, which is that surrounding infrastructure. And if some people just don't have that, and it's been a tough one, but I'm like, I don't know if you have an opportunity to succeed. If you do have those folks in place, and again, this is where it comes to the wartime experience, more and more people understand the impacts of those elements, then they're going to understand the investment, and they're going to give you the ability to make some bets. And if you're directionally accurate in those, then that's what's going to carry you forward. I'll tell you a quick little story. So I had the opportunity to be in a room full of sales leaders a few weeks back, and there was a sales leader whom most of the folks on here will know the name, at a very successful high growth company, which people here would know the name. And after the pseudo presentation was done, one of the sales leaders asked, so what would you would have done differently, looking back on kind of the success that you had, but like, how would you have done things differently? And without skipping a beat, he said, I would have invested more in strategy and operations. That was now a wartime leader who understood. And people asked him, say, okay, great. Like, so then what else? And like, number two, it took him about 30 seconds to think about something else. He's like, yeah, but that's just kind of immaterial. He's like, I need somebody who's my right-hand person to be thinking about all the things that I'm trying to do and how do I get there successfully. And this would be, you would look at this and be like, this person is considered a success and this organization is a success. And they said, it was so painful. We had so many misses and so many challenges, and we could have got there faster, better, kept more people in the business. And that's the one regret. So you look for those wartime or war experienced leaders to surround yourself with or work for. Because if they're not there and they don't get it and they haven't failed yet or haven't seen the failure or the impact of the failure, and it's really hard to convince otherwise.
Dharmesh?
Yeah, no, that Noah's spot on. Like that's been my experience as well. It's, you know, leaders, CROs who've seen the movie, they get it. I've spoken to a couple of CFOs and CROs, and they all led with three things. Like one of them was the first one that had the CRO, and he said what Noah had want was higher is there was the cost of replacing a fully ramped AE that's is $1 million, and if I'm losing them for due to pure issues or quota issues, poorly defined territories and quotas, it's a no-brainer. If I can have a system that can help me from just not doing anything, help me save one person back, it's huge. My top performers. The second piece was they talked about ramp time, right? It takes on an average, I mean, most companies that I know,
Hey,
they have scope. Yeah.
I think you cut out a little bit. So you were talking about the $2 million per rep, and then can you just kind of go through that? The connection is definitely in and out a bit.
Yeah, sorry. No, so the CRO said they use a number of $1 million. They were like, the cost of replacing a fully ramped AE is $1 million for us. So if I were to take a look at a platform versus $1 million, I would invest in that platform to do that. This is again not the RevOps. This is a CRO talking. The second piece came from RevOps leaders, and this is tied to ramp time. How long does it take on an average to give territories and quotas after SCO or even during the year? If I can cut that time down from 3 to 4 weeks, which is like even best case large companies, we would be giving territories a couple of months after SCO, largely because budgets. The manual way of doing things meant we were doing things and budgets are still being locked. And every time a new hire came through the year, it would take them 2 to 3 weeks before we gave them a territory and quota. So that is added to your ramp time. The other part came from a CFO who said, well, we have a lot of asks. Our own RevOps teams, and every time we make an ask of a what if, it could take a 2 to 3 week turnaround time, because the team is gone back to do analysis. So if I can cut back that time to 2 to 3 weeks to a couple of days, I know for a fact we'll be a lot more productive as an organization. But these are all leaders. The common theme, they had very strong RevOps leaders. The CFO, in fact, used to be a RevOps himself, who moved into the CFO role. So he's seen the perspective. So it's super important, like Noah said, to make sure that the CRO or the leader that you report into understands the value of strong RevOps. And I think these are the three things that they intuitively get. Other than that, I can look at impact and attainment. Those are harder things to sort of track.
So, I think that is it for today. Anybody have any questions, answers? We've got like a couple minutes to answer questions. Please drop them over there in the Q&A. I think it'll probably be on the right-hand side of your screen. I mean, while we're waiting, like Noah, if you've got like, what's the key takeaway for us from your perspective? If I had to like leave with one piece of knowledge from today that I'm like, this is what I need to go do, like, what do you think that is?
So there are probably a couple, but I'll start with one because of the framework of this presentation was really about the investment in the capacity model, focusing on the breadth of performance. Your CFO, without question, have not asked you yet or is evaluating is what are the breadth of performance? What does that bell curve look like across your go-to-market teams for performance? Because headcount's one of the costliest things out there, particularly in this market, where if you're thinking about folks looking at profitability and trying to make sure that their earnings are hitting, that's a surefire way to drive it. Do you have a model that's successful at scale? Meaning that if all of your reps were ramped, is it even a profitable model? What's your cost of sale in there? And looking at all the other elements that you're trying to drive, oftentimes again, when you think about the broad spectrum of areas where people can go and make mistakes and try to focus on, there may be something fundamental in that very first building block, like Dharmesh was talking about in the territory. Is there even an element? Is is the model fundamentally wrong at the very beginning? And so I've hired some incredible talent that I really trust on this, and they have some great tools to use. But that to me was like fundamentally important. And so if you don't feel like you have a good grasp of the breadth of performance, and certainly the time to ramp that's the unicorn, that's the nirvana out there to try to solve that. But if you don't have that in focus, 100% that's what you need to do, because part of this ultimately gets into things like being able to drive those first steps, like territory management and what does your capacity look like. Fundamental building blocks, something I look at every company when I get there and work on and create. So if you haven't done that yet, do that. That would be a first step. And if you've already done that and looking for more, I would say if you know the Fullcast team, I call them at a frequent. Tyler, you guys know, you're on my speed dial. So I do get advice and input from you on things, because it's a constantly learning thing. You don't know everything, and there's constantly things are changing, evolving. So stay in touch with those ideas and whatever's happening out there on the horizon.
And Dharmesh, what about you? What's your key takeaway? Assuming your internet
I would say this
keeps up with us.
Yeah, no, it's been a little spotty here. No, I think it's about building the plan the right way, like making sure everybody you build a system where everybody is allowed to participate, all the people that matter, the reps and the managers who are going to carry the quotas, right? They have a say in how territories are defined. They're involved in the process. That's what drives transparency and a culture of trust and honesty. But then you also have to bake in agility, right? Because change is going to be constant. People are going to go moving. And so part of good operations leader is to drive engagement through involvement of those people, and then enforcement of rules like data governance and everything that gets in the way of the best strategy, right? So engage and enforce. I think those are the two things I would say. Enforce consistent policies. Yes, managers don't like rules. Nobody likes rules, but they're okay if they know they're going to be fairly applied to everybody. Then it's a level playing field.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it. Surprisingly, still no questions, which means we were perfect.
What an amazing session. Thank you, Tyler, Dharmesh, and Noah, for your awesome insights and wisdom today. Just a quick reminder, everyone who attended, the recording, key takeaways, along with the slide deck shared will be made available on the MSP website. Thank you again for attending, and we will see you at the next event. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.